Okay, so in this section what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about the produced and consumed tags. And so we'll be making another program as far as that goes. So first and foremost, what we need to do is add a new routine, and we'll call this produced consumed. Okay, so there's a lot of, I would say, misinterpretation as far as the way produced and consumed tags are done. What we can do is we'll throw in like a user-defined data type, right? So what we'll do is we'll make this we'll go ahead and throw a user-defined data type in there, and then we'll go ahead. So we'll call this prodcons, and then we'll say this is for communication between processors. Alright, so this is the way we talk between processors. First member we'll have is we'll call this a bool. We'll call the data type, make the data type of the bool obviously what it is. We'll make the dim, we'll give it 96 just to show the dimensions. So we'll have 96 bools that we can use, right? We'll select OK. We'll do the next section. We'll call this, and let's go ahead and make this all caps. I like that better. Let's do a dent, and then we'll do the dent value, and we'll make the dent value, and we'll again put let's put 96 in there. Make that just the generic number that we use. We'll put a real, so we'll do basically some floats in there. Real, spell that right, and then we'll come in and put that is 96 of those. Well, I'll tell you what, let's do more than that. Let's do 480. Let's just max this system, not max it out, but give it more. If you're building a system and you're doing data types, you should do as much as you can. Okay, so we can do strings and stuff of that nature if we wanted to. Basically, if you're passing bits back and forth and stuff of that nature, you really don't need to be doing too much of that. But what we'll do is, now that we have this made, we'll hit apply, and then now in our data type we have a prodcon, right? So we have the data type right here. Okay, so with that said, we'll go ahead and work on our second processor. So we're going to go minimize this. I'm going to open up a new file. We're going to be using the emulator again, so we're going to be calling this training. Actually, what do we name our other one? So we'll keep it consistent. Studio training. Okay, so let's do this. Studio training. And then we'll call this processor 2. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that file. Again, version 28. Keep things consistent. And we'll be using, we'll call this slot 9. We'll let it make its process. Make the file we just made. So that means we selected slot 9. So let's just go through that real quick. In the Studio 5000 emulate chassis, basically I'm going to be using slot 9. right? So I'll have slot 2 talking to slot 9. Of course, this is just in the this is the same setup as anywhere else, right? Okay, so it's starting, and then we're going to come in here and set up the initial setup that we did before. So we'll come in, change this to periodic. We'll change this to 50. Come in here, we have everything we need, and what we're going to be doing is, let's go into our other processor, our original one. We have our data type in here, right? So let's go ahead and export this data type. So when we're going to export it, we're going to send it to the desktop, and we're going to import it into the new program. So I'll select desktop, export it. I'll go back to the new program, and for user defined, I'll import. So I don't have to make it again, right? I mean, it makes sense to only do this once. Import it in, and then as soon as it comes in, it's going to ask you if you want to change anything. Obviously, we do not want to change anything. Okay, so now that we have our data type, which is the same data type we just made. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll come in, and what we need to do is add our processor into the I/O tree. So we'll come in and let's see, discover modules. I'm not sure. Yeah, we can't do that. So I want to say it's an emulation. So the emulator controller, and this is version 28, and we will keep it named the same thing we named the other one. So studio training, and then I believe we called it 2017. Okay, so make sure you select the correct slot. This is slot 2 that it's going to be in. And that is what we call the first one, right? The name does not exactly have to be perfect, so just know that. Okay, so now that we have that in there, we have, everything set up. So we have our chassis that we're going to be talking to inside the rack that we want, right? So we have to add it into our I/O first. Then we're going to do that in their second file too. So let's take this offline. So yeah, save this first. Okay, so we'll come in and we'll add new module. We'll select down until we get to our emulator. Which I believe passed it. Let's just type in emulator. Okay, so it's a quick way to find it too. Okay, so we named this one Studio Training Processor 2, right? 2. And we put this in slot 9. So now we have it in our primary program. So we have our produce consume that we added. We need to add our JSR, right? JSR, and then come in and put that tie that in so that it's scanned. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come in and put in some logic between the two, and we'll just pass some bits back and forth. Okay, so in this program, let's just go ahead and do the same thing. Add new, and we'll call this produced, consumed, and then we'll come into our main and then add a JSR. JSR will have our tie-in to our main to our produce consumed, right? Okay, so in produce consumed, what we want to do, and we can go ahead and make these our data. I'm sorry, let's do that in our controller tags. So we want to go to edit, and we want to say, okay, we want to have a value that we're giving it, right? So we'll call this let's see, received. Time. And then that'll be a dent. And then what we want to do is we want to right click. Let's just make it. And so you have to receive it first, right? So you have to make it, and then go to edit. Then for this, you want to go. Sorry. We want to go to consumed. So this would be our consume tag. And connection will connect. So we'll choose in our consume over here. So once we select consumed, we have to pick our producer. Our producer is going to be in the one that's the other processor coming from slot 2. So we're going to choose that one, which is already in our IO tree. So it only gives you one choice, right? And then we want to pick the data that we're going to be receiving. Now we don't have that yet because we haven't put it in, so we'll just click OK and we'll come back and edit that, or we'll cancel this and edit it in just a second. So what we'll do is we'll put produced time, and then we'll go ahead and make that, and then we'll go ahead into properties and we'll put produced. Now in produced, you don't have to put anything in here. You know, advanced just kind of shows you the RPIs and stuff of that nature. Generally speaking, you know, just make sure your data type's right, and that would be good. So now that we have our produced and consumed set up, right? And we got to come back and put our consumed data in this processor. But if you wanted to, you can go to configure and then go to produced and just see the produced tags. You can go to configure and just see the consumed tags. So we don't have anything set up in consumed right now, right? So let's go back to all. Okay, so let's go into the other processor and do the same thing. So we know we named this produce time, right? So let's copy that. And we're going to basically do the same thing over on the other processor. So let's go to tags. And then we'll throw this in there, and then we'll call this produced. Sorry, I went to description. So make sure you go to properties, edit properties, produced, check your connections, just you know, as a good practice, right? Okay, so in this we're going to name this received time, and we'll come back, edit the properties. This will be a consumed. We're going to go to connection. We're going to select our connector, which is going to be the processor in slot 9, which it will only show you the selections that you have available. So if you don't have anything available, check your I/O and make sure you put it in the I/O right. Okay, so select that. And then the remote data that we're going to be receiving is going to be the produce time. Alright, so we're going to be, getting the produce time that we have. What we want to be actually, let's accept that. And what we should be doing is going to our ProdCon. I tell you what, let's just keep it as a dent right now, and then we'll get it working that way. So we won't use our ProdCon right now, but we will set up the consumed is set up just the way it's set up here, right? So make sure you select consumed, connections, and put in the remote value that you want to put in. We'll do this in the second processor. So now that we're looking at receive time, we want to go in and change that to consumed, connection, select our processor again, and then produce time. Okay, so select that, and then what we'll do is we'll download this. We'll go to our AB VBP virtual backplane, right? And then what we want to do, first and foremost, we need to add the processor in slot 9. So create, put that in there. Okay, so then we want to go and download it to it. And I don't see it populating yet, so there it goes. So sometimes you have to be a little bit patient with the the setup as far as if you're using any kind of virtual stuff, virtual backplanes or anything. So we will come back and get the proper setup. So let's go in here. Let's go to the next one, and then we'll download this one. So you have to make sure both of them match up perfectly, or else it will give you an alarm. So we set them up offline, and then you download them, and then you set them up. You'll have them. Okay, so now if we had any kind of issue with the received data we were getting, right? If we had any kind of issue with the received data, let's go to monitor. The received data that we were getting, we would have it in, it would show up a triangle here, like you've probably seen over here a minute ago. But everything is set up correctly, so well, I'll just show you right quick how this is working. Okay, so let's go to produced, and let's throw in another timer. And we'll throw in another timer, and we'll call this communication timer. And this is just something I'm showing you as an illustration on how to use stuff. Nothing is written in stone. This is how things should be done or anything. So again, this is just going to have a time that it runs, right? So we'll call this we'll just throw in 60 seconds or 1 minute, and then we'll throw it in. Okay, we'll have this reset. Based upon that, and then what we'll do is we'll add a rung here, and we will fill. So we'll move the accumulated value of the timer into our produced. So we'll call this the what is it? The produced time. Okay, so if we go into the other processor right now, we should be getting the value, right? So it should be reading. And although we're not producing anything over here, what we can do is come over here and let's see, copy this rung, go over here, paste, and then you have to make the tag, which is fine. Alright, and then we'll come in and go back to copy until I like to copy and paste a little bit. So this should start sending data both ways. So now if we look at our system, we have the produce value that we got coming over is producing a time, and then the received data is producing a time. So if we come over here, we can see that we're producing a time and we're receiving a time. So produced and consumed, if we sum everything up, let's talk about this real quick. When we sum everything up, make sure first and foremost you have two processors talking to each other, right? So what are some key points that we want to let's see, notepad, what are some key points we want to talk about here? So we want to make sure that you have it's going to be two processors, right? Two processors passing data between each other, right? Okay, so how do we do that? So what we do is we set up the processors in the IO tree of the opposite processor. Okay, so what I mean by that is if processor A to processor B, and this is our goal, right? So is the goal, then in processor A you need to have the processor B set up in the IO tree, right? So if you look at that, we had our standard processor that say this is the one we started with, right? So this is the one that's in slot 0 or slot 2, and then we added the processor we're talking to in slot 9. So we wanted to add, so if you look at that, processor A, which is this processor, is wanting to set up and talk to processor B, then we have to set up processor B inside the I/O tree. And then vice versa for that. So let's just say do the same for the second processor. Oh, and spelling is correct. Okay, so alright, so to do that, we went into the next processor, right? And select it, and we set up the next in the I/O tree in the backplane, right? We set up the one we wanted to talk to. So originally, and you can tell by which one you're currently in by it has an arrow. Then the other one that you're talking to will not have an arrow. So this is not the program this is not the processor that the chassis that is running this program. And the same goes for this one, right? So you can tell which one is actually running by the arrow. And what we want to do is first set up the processor in the I/O tree. As soon as we have that, we can go into our controller tags and set the data that we want to set. And once we do that, we can go to Edit in the Properties and select Produced or Consumed. And it's very important that these two, the names right here, the names of your data really doesn't matter. What does matter is that in your consumed tag, the connection right here, that whatever the tag name is for the remote data that you're trying to receive is exactly what is in the other processor. So you see I have produced time in here. If I look, I have produced time, right? So I could have named this anything. I could have named this processor A produced time, and in processor B I could have had processor A produced time. And that would have still, as long as that lined up properly, it would have worked fine. So the important part that you need to take in consideration here is when you're trying to set everything up, make sure that you put them in your processors in the I/O tree first. And whether or not they're communicating through an Ethernet card or not, then you just want to add that into the Ethernet card. So in this case, we're just going backplane to backplane, right? We're going backplane to backplane. And so we added it in our I/O tree. The next, you add your tags, and then whatever tags you want to communicate to, right? So you're producing one, and I always name it like, realistically, this should have been like produced to processor A, or whatever. I usually put what it's going to show that it's going to work. So, or to show that it's easy to find. In this case, it's kind of you're in one processor, and you're in the other processor. I wanted to put in the produced section and the received section. So I could come back and put that as, and it may not take it because, so produced time from processor A, and that it probably didn't take it, yeah. Because it's already attached to another process, it's not going to take it. But what we can do is download, or we can come back and edit that offline if we need to. So we'll save both of these now that we have it working. And I'll come back and I'll do another video just to show this a little bit different, but in the same token, because I believe there's still probably some questions about this. And I want to answer and get everything 100% set up so that it's easy for you to understand. So make sure you grasp that first and foremost that you tie in your I/O tree, your processor you want to speak to in your I/O tree on both processors. When you do that, you want to make sure you add your data that you want to communicate to, produced and consumed, into that section. So again, we'll go over this one more time, just as like a part 2, and to clarify things. So hopefully, I know this ran kind of long, but hopefully you got a lot out of how to do produced and consumed, and you've seen how to set it up, even through a virtual backplane. It's very easy, right? What took so long is kind of explaining the situation. We could have did it a lot quicker, and we'll run through that a lot quicker in the next video. Okay, so to wrap this one up, I know it ran kind of long, so just wanted to wrap it up, and thank you for your time. We'll go ahead and, like I said, hopefully you got what you wanted out of produced and consumed, and we'll touch base on this a little bit more in the next video. Thank you.